Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio. We're gonna do a fun 3D modeling project today, but the reason you're seeing my face and not my computer screen before we get to that is I just wanted to take a quick moment and say thank you. We passed 500 subscribers here on the channel a couple of weeks ago. And so if you're one of those 500 people, thanks so much for subscribing. If you're not one of those 500 people, go click the button down below. That'd be cool. And then maybe we can add to that number and maybe get to 1,000 before the end of the year. That would be awesome. What we're going to do today, kind of in recognition of hitting that 500 subscriber milestone, is we're going to revisit what I'm pretty sure is my very most popular video that I've ever released on the channel. And it was a little over a year ago. I released a video talking about using Blender to custom model a little 3D printed part that we ended up using to fill a gap in a mecha model kit that I was working on. And so I've learned a lot since then. I've actually gotten some experience playing with some additional applications besides just Blender. And so what I thought we'd do today is revisit that same project, but we're going to use Plasticity this time, which is a newer application. I don't even think it was released at the time that I released that video a little over a year ago. And yeah, we're gonna build that same project in Plasticity. At least we're gonna start out building that same project. We'll probably expand it a bit because you'll see Plasticity gives us a lot of powerful tools for doing some really cool hard surface modeling type of work and adding extra details onto our part. And so, yeah, that's the plan for today is we'll start with that same project and then we'll probably carry it on a bit further beyond what we did in that original Blender video. So without any further delay, I'm gonna fire up Plasticity and let's get into it.
Okay, so this is not Plasticity, this is Blender. I guess I'm a big liar. Told you guys I was gonna open Plasticity. I thought we should take a quick look here in Blender at the part we created last time. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a card up in the corner with a link over to that video if you want to watch the whole thing. But this is what we built. And just real quickly, I wanted to remind us that this part down here at the bottom, this hexagonal plug, and then this little plate that sits on top of it are the important bits that have to be precise and have to fit into the hole on the back of the arm of the model kit that we're trying to fill. And so when we built this before, we needed exact dimensions for this stuff down here, and then this fin part up on top is basically freeform. We can do just about whatever we want up there as long as it's not too long in the front to back direction to fit into the space that's available there. So yeah, this becomes much more of an artistic freeform kind of modeling exercise up top here, but this peg down here at the bottom is very important that it fits precisely into our model kit. And so keeping that in mind as we switch over to Plasticity, I think that'll be important because we'll see kind of where Plasticity falls a bit short compared to Blender, in my opinion, and then where it really shines. All right, so now here we are in Plasticity, and we've just started with a blank new scene. So we get this default cube in the middle that I'm just going to delete real quick here, and that'll give us a blank canvas to get started. Now, I'm not going to do a full-on tutorial here for how to use Plasticity. There are plenty of those elsewhere on YouTube that you can find if you look around. If you're interested in me doing that, let me know down in the comments, and I'll think about doing that. But yeah, I'm just going to go through this exercise. The keys that I press on my keyboard are down here at the bottom of the screen, so that'll help you, follow along maybe with the shortcuts that I'm using. So what we're going to start with here is that hexagonal peg that we need to have very precise dimensions for. So I'm going to go to the polygon tool here. I'm going to snap to the origin and then pull out here along the x-axis. And I can hit tab to enter a precise value here for the diameter of our shape. And I know I want it to be 3.3 millimeters. Now you'll notice actually the units that it's showing here in Plasticity are meters, but I'm treating them as millimeters, and that'll work just fine for what we need. And then you'll see down at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen down here, it shows us different shortcuts we can do while this tool is selected. And one of those is to hold down Shift and move our mouse wheel to change the number of segments in our polygon. So I can do this to get 6 segments, and then I will right-click to lock that in. So we get this polygon shape here, which we can now select, and it gives us this little gizmo here that we can just pull on to extrude. Now the extrusion tool, you'll see there's a distance shown there next to my cursor. You might think I can hit tab and type a value. Well, for this particular tool, hitting tab changes the extrusion to go in both directions instead of just one. So that doesn't do what we need. So in order to do the precise dimension here, I've got to just let go of the mouse button, and then down here in this dialog box, I can change this exact length here and enter what I need, which is 3.5 millimeters. And then again, right click to confirm. Now you'll see we've got this solid, it shows up over here, and we still have this curve, which is that original hexagon we drew. It's sitting up here. As we go through this exercise, I'm gonna just be deleting these temporary, line objects that we're drawing as guidelines, just to keep the thing clean and so that it's easier for us to manage what's on the screen. That way you're not selecting it by accident, that sort of thing. So I've gone to the top view here, and I need to draw that unusual shape. It looks kind of like this. At least half of it looks like that. Now here's where we run into one of the first issues that I have with Plasticity versus Blender. So in Blender, I'd figured out the exact XY coordinates of each of these points to build this shape. And in Blender, I can select a point and just enter its XY, Z coordinate values directly in a little dialog that is available to me. Here in Plasticity, you'll see if I select one of these, down here in the very bottom right-hand corner, it's showing me the X and Y coordinates of that thing. But as far as I can tell, there is no way to edit those. And so that makes things a little bit tricky. And so what I've found, the easiest thing for, at least for this case, what I need to do here is I'm going to delete this and create it again. I'm just going to turn on the grid snapping, and I'm going to change the increments to 0.1 because I know that I don't need anything more precise than that. And I'm actually just going to look at this grid and count the squares as I draw this line so that I end up with my points in all the right spots. So I know, like, I want this Y to be 2.2, which is going to be right there. And then we can drag over to X of 1.1 and down to here. Is this right? 2.1 and 1.1? Yes. And then all the way down to X of 1.4, which would be this, and Y of minus 2.3. So we're at minus 2 right now, so we'll go down 3 to there and then straight over to the origin. So yeah, that's a little clunky compared to what I can do in Blender, where I can, very easily manipulate those points after I've drawn it and get them in the right spot. But anyway, I've drawn now half of this shape, and to get the other half, we can hit Alt-X, which is the mirror tool in Plasticity, and it gives us this little gizmo here at the origin. And what you want to do is click on the side that you want to mirror from. So if I want to mirror from this side of the x-axis over to the other side, I just click that, and I end up with this shape like that. So once again, I can select this, I can pull it down to extrude it down, and I know that I want this to be 0.75. All right, so let's stop for a moment here. I'm going to turn off this grid snapping so I don't forget to do it later. And let's talk a bit about that and the precision, because this is the precision piece, right? The thing that we needed to make that's going to fit into our model kit. So in Blender, we built this with a non-destructive modeling type of a technique where we were adding modifiers onto shapes. And so it would be easy for me to select this hexagon, for example, and then change its radius or diameter later on just by changing a parameter. I can't do that here, right? Because in Plasticity, once I've created this shape, it kind of exists here now. So if I wanted to make this peg, bigger or smaller in diameter, it would be a little tricky to do. Like, I'd have to try to select this thing and scale it down maybe, and figure out, percentage based how that would work out for, if I wanted to scale it down by an exact dimension, number of millimeters or something like that. If I end up printing this out and it doesn't fit in my model kit, then, I'm gonna have to do some sort of a trial and error process where I end up adjusting the dimensions of this thing until I get it to fit. And so that's going to always, I think, be easier in Blender than it is here in Plasticity. In Plasticity here, if I wanted to change this peg, I would probably actually just delete it and create a new hexagon, of the new diameter, and then try that out, rather than trying to adjust what was already here. So just, I think, keep that in mind. If you're doing precise modeling types of tasks, where the dimensions really matter and where you might have to do a little bit of trial and error or iterating and actually printing the physical object to see if it fits, I would, in Plasticity, do those things and go ahead and print this. Maybe I would, build kind of the shape of the fin up on top, but not spend a lot of time on it, and then just print that out as a test and try it in my model to make sure it fits and make any adjustments to these precise pieces here before I move on to the more creative aspects, which is where plasticity really shines. So we'll get onto that in just a minute. Actually, just right now, let's just do that. So if I select, first of all, this is two separate objects, right? We've got this object here, this one down here. So we can select these two together and hit the Q shortcut key to Boolean them together by hitting Q again. And you'll see when I accept this, now a lot of that extra geometry up there is gone. So these are actually now combined into a single object. And then that's going to be a little bit easier for us to manage. So let's look at that single object from the side and zoom way out here and figure out what we want to do for the more artistic fin shape that we're going to put here on top, right? So I'm going to start kind of out here with a similar shape to what we built when we did this in Blender long ago. Something kind of like this, I believe. And we'll go ahead and close it off. Right, so now we have this fin shape. It's centered right on top of our peg, which is great. And we'll grab this thing and extrude it out. Now we can use that little shortcut we learned about earlier where we hit tab and it goes in both directions. So that way we can keep it centered along the axis there and do something kind of like that, right? So that'll give us the thickness of at the bottom is what I was looking at, because up here at the top it's way too wide. We need it to taper in for sure. I'm going to delete this guideline again. And in Blender, again, we did that with a modifier where we did a deformation of the top and shrunk it down. Here in Plasticity, instead of doing something like that, it's again easier just to modify the shape itself. So what we'll do is we'll draw a new line, a little guideline here, and we're going to stop it or start it at this corner, and we're just going to drag it up here. And I'm going to kind of eyeball like what kind of angle do I want? How narrow do I want this to be up at the top of our fin? Probably something like that is fine, right? So now we have this line. It's just kind of floating out here in space. But if we select it and we hit the C key for cut, then it wants us to select the target body that we're cutting into, and we just pick this thing. So now it's showing us with this red plane that it's extruded out from our line. This is where it's going to cut that shape if we accept this operation, and so I will right click to do that. And you'll see now, I'll go ahead and delete this line again because we don't need it. You'll see that it's actually broken this into two separate objects. So I could, for example, just grab this and move it out of the way, which is not what I want to do. I just want to delete it, right? And now we have this leaning in toward the top, only on one side, but that's fine because we can use our mirror tool again and mirror it over to the other side. And I'm going to hit Q, which joins these two halves together. So right now, if it mirrors this thing, we'll end up, you see this black line down the middle, we'll end up with two separate objects that are the two halves of the piece. If I hit the Q key to union them together, it will end up being one object. So I'm going to do that. And so now we have this nice fin shape. And if we're going to exactly copy what we did in the Blender video, then we would create a panel line that kind of comes out here and down at an angle and up to here. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And we'll look straight from the side. Now there are a few ways that I've found that are interesting and useful for creating panel lines in Plasticity. And I'll show you this one here right now. We might actually look at a different idea for creating panel lines later on in this same video. I want to go down an exact 45-degree angle here, so I'm going to hit tab twice to edit this angle and make it 135. And so that locks me into, you know, what I know is going to be that 45-degree angle that I'm after. We'll do this, and then we'll drag it out here. So I'm just making sure this is outside of my shape on both ends. So now again, looking from 3D, we've got this, it kind of runs through the middle of this object, but this is the center of our line. So if we're going to imagine, you know, dragging a panel line chisel along this line, that's the line we want to create. And I want to pretend that we're dragging a 0.2 millimeter scribing chisel along there. And so I want a 0.2 millimeter wide line. So to do that, I'm going to offset this curve, and I'm going to pull this down. I'm going to hit tab again, which allows us to offset in both directions. And if I go again and enter an exact value here of 0.1, then I've gone 0.1 millimeters away from the line below and also above. So I end up with a 0.2 millimeter wide line. So I'll confirm that, and I'll take this middle line and delete it because we don't need it anymore. And now we've got kind of what our panel line should be. Again, it's just here in the middle of this object. And so what I'm going to do is use that same cut tool that we did before. So I'm going to hit C on this, and I'm going to select this object and right-click to confirm that. So now we've cut that, and then we'll select the bottom line. We'll hit C again. We'll select this object, and we'll right-click to confirm. And now we can delete both of these lines. And so now we've cut this object. It's actually 3 separate objects. So I could, if my mouse cursor will let me do it, I could select this guy, for example, and just move him right out, right? So it's literally 3 separate objects. But the reason I did that is so that I can select these faces and push them in. So see, we can make whatever depth we want here now for our panel line, and I want it to probably be 0.2. So I'm going to go 0.2 here and lock that in. We'll select this face, we'll push it in by 0.2. I'm just realizing now that if I had left the snapping on, then I can probably make that even easier to do, right? Because if we select this and we push it in, it'll go 0.1, 0.2, yeah. And then I don't have to be typing exact values. And then back here at the back, we actually have 2 faces here because there was that line where the back of the wing changes direction, and we exactly split that with our panel line. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I select both of them by holding down Shift like that, and then I can push this in by 0.2, and that works just fine. So now we have this indented panel line all the way around, and it's the depth we want and it's the width we want, but we have 3 separate pieces. So we should Shift select, try to select the object. There we go. Shift select all 3 objects and just hit QQ to Boolean them all together. So now they're back into a single object. If you're wondering about these lines we see in the back, that's because I have the view set in X-ray mode right now, so I can hit Alt-Z and turn that off. It's nice to have it on sometimes because you can see the structure, and you can also select things back there on the back side of the object, but sometimes it gets a little bit busy. So for the moment, I guess we'll turn that off so that you guys can see what this actually looks like all completed. So at this point, we basically have the same thing that we built in Blender. And we've kind of talked about how this precision modeling stuff here at the bottom of the part is probably easier to do in Blender. Definitely easier to modify if you're making small changes to get the fit just right. You can see probably that this upper part was much easier to do here in Plasticity, at least in my opinion. And we haven't yet really touched on some of the stuff that makes Plasticity really, really nice for hard surface modeling. So let's do a little bit of additional experimenting with this thing before we print the final result. So the first thing I want to tell you about in Plasticity is how easy it is to do bevels and fillets and chamfers on edges. So if I just pick an edge like this, it gives me this little gizmo, and I can drag it. If I drag it out this way, I get a little curved edge, and if I drag it this way, I get a straight chamfer, right? So here's my fillet, here's my chamfer. We'll pull this out a little. I want to actually add some sort of rounded curviness to this shape, right? So that's a nice thing to do here in Plasticity is once you get your basic shape, you can, I don't want that to curve, I want it to be flat like this. You can make it, you can embellish it and make it much more interesting. I'm going to turn snapping to the grid off because I noticed as I was dragging that it was locking me at certain locations. I'm going to put a curve on this one. So yeah, now our leading edge is a little nicer. Up here at the top, we'll grab this edge and we'll put a little curve there just to kind of smooth that out. And maybe take the point off of this one by going kind of like this, and then a little curve there, and maybe a bigger curve here. No, actually a smaller curve I think is nice there. Yeah, so we get a shape like that. We'll give this bottom edge here a nice little fillet treatment. Chamfer treatment. I get the terminology mixed up a lot between fillet and chamfer. Chamfer is the straight one, fillet is the rounded one. All right, yeah, so now we have this, which I think is a much more organic, nice looking shape. So that's a cool thing you can do, fillets and chamfers in Plasticity, and see how easy that was. And actually, if I reselect one of those faces, like this one here that came from the chamfer, Plasticity remembers that that's what created it. And so if I drag this in and out, it actually just adjusts the, you know, the shallowness or curviness of that chamfer. So you can adjust ones that you've already done in the past as well. Yeah, so there we go. Let's add some more visual detail up here at the top of the wing as well. I mentioned earlier that I would show you guys a different way to do panel lines. So yeah, let's do that. So if I select this face, remember the face of this fin is not straight vertical, right? It's leaning in just a little bit. And so if we want to draw on this face, we need to create a temporary construction plane, which we can do by hitting the space bar. And it says up here at the top of the screen that we're in this temporary construction plane. Now what that means is if we draw any lines or shapes or things like that, they will be flush with the surface of this fin. And so what I'm going to do is grab our line tool. I'm just going to draw kind of a shape that comes in straight like this and comes down. We're going to kind of create like a leading edge of the wing kind of an idea, I think. So something like that. Let's actually break it up too. So let's create a couple more lines coming off of this curve straight out. There's one, and we'll create one kind of down here. I could spend a lot of time to make sure those were all equidistant, but I'm just going to eyeball it here, and that should be good enough. So now we have those lines. See how they're flush along the surface of the wing there. And so now the simple, quick way, which I don't like as much for doing panel lines, is I can grab this line and I can use the pipe tool. So if I hit P, I get the pipe tool. And it wants to know the radius of, so basically we're going to draw a pipe around this line, and then we can use that to carve into that surface. And so the radius of that pipe right now is very small. We probably want it, if we make it 0.1 as an example, that's a radius, not a diameter. So that'll make a 0.2 millimeter wide line. So same as the width of the line that we created down here using that other technique. I want this panel line actually to be a little bit smaller. So if I go like 0.75 here, that'll make us a 0.15 millimeter panel line, as if we had used a 0.15 millimeter chisel, right? Except that it's a rounded panel line, so rather than being squared off edges like this one here, it'll have rounded edges. So it won't be exactly like we used a chisel, because a chisel would give us those nice square edges, right? So anyway, I can, again, with using my shortcut keys that it shows me down here at the bottom corner of the screen, I can hit W, which is the shortcut for difference, and it wants me to select a target body to cut into, so I'm going to select my wing here, and it'll show me now with red that it's going to cut out that little circular profile there. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click to confirm that, and you'll see that now we have this little panel line dug out here, but again, it's got a rounded profile, not a squared one. So again, that's why I don't like it as much as doing it the more complicated way to get a squared off panel line, but it is much quicker, right? As I do these other two little small ones, you can see that it doesn't take much at all once you get used to it to create something like that. Now I will go ahead and also delete these lines, and we'll get out of our temporary construction plane by pressing that X. So now we have those, and you can see the difference, right? They're rounded panel lines versus this squared off one. But when we print them at this small scale, they'll look okay, and they'll give us some nice detail here on our part. So yeah, let's go add one more kind of a raised detail just to give you one more example. So we'll create a object that looks kind of like this. We'll draw a thing this way. We'll come down. I'm going to hit Alt-Z so we can see through this because we were out of X-ray mode. I want to come down to maybe about there, come up at an angle. Yeah, that'll look nice, and then close this off. So we have a shape like that. I'm going to hit B for bevel and drag this little thing to give us some little curved edges on this shape.
Yeah, so that looks good. And then we will grab this and pull it out. And the exact depth really doesn't matter at the moment because we'll adjust it later, but yeah, that's sticking out from that wing way further than I had in mind. So let's put it back about there. Yeah, that looks good. So now we can use another tool down here at the bottom in this bar. We haven't been paying attention to this all along, but based on what you currently have selected, Plasticity shows you a bunch of different options down here, and they're all listed with their shortcut key. So like move is G, rotate is R, scale is S, and so on. And these change depending on what kind of object you have selected. And then over here, the same thing. These are things you can do to this object. And so one of the things we can do is a rectangular array. So I'm going to click that, and you'll see it gives us this nice little preview of what we're creating here. So I'm going to follow this edge down, and I'm just going to click because then we'll adjust this. We can hold down shift with our wheel to change the number of things, and I think I only want 3. And then we'll grab this gizmo and pull these up kind of there. Oh, we've confused it by rotating too much. All right, I'm going to hit escape. We're going to do that again. So one thing I like about Plasticity is these nice previews that you see as you do these things. However, if you're rotating around while you're working on something, sometimes it gets a little confused, and that's fine. I forgive it because it's a very powerful piece of software. All right, that's about what I want, I think. So we have these 3 fins kind of sticking out right there, and the depth of them is not bad. We can still move them if we want, like we can push them in, pull them out, but I think something like that should be fine. I'm not sure if that one's actually going to reach all the way. I want it to be at least halfway along the wing because we're going to mirror this all to the other side, and I want to make sure that they merge, that they meet up on the other side there, or on the back side there. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. So yeah, speaking of mirroring it, at this point, I think what I want to do is take, well, let's first delete this little guideline that's back here, if I can manage to delete it. You see this blue line? Zoom in, select. There we go. All right, just to clean things up. So we have this object, all 3 of these, and this wing, they're all separate. So let's QQ to union them together. Now I think all of the wing is one object, right? And so we can hit, the back side of it over here is still plain, you see, right? So if we hit Alt-X, and I can't see my mirror gizmo, it's down here. If I click that side to mirror it back across, we'll get the same details that we just added on both sides. And again, we're going to hit Q to merge the 2 halves together so we don't end up with 2 separate halves that are separate objects. Right? I'll turn off the X-ray mode again, and we can look around. So that's pretty good. Let's do a little bit more playing with these edges. So like I could chamfer this edge just a little bit to smooth it out at the front, and you see how it stops up here. Plasticity tries to find a continuous edge, right? I'll escape out of here. This is the only edge I had selected. So as I start to chamfer this edge, it tries to find a continuous edge, and it thinks this is too big of a bend, so it's not continuing around the top there. If we want it to continue around the top, we can make it do that by just selecting some additional edges, right? So if I select up there as well, and maybe all the way back here too, now it'll probably chamfer all the way down to like here. So let's see if that happens. It didn't. It's stopping right there. Yeah, because of those objects being in the way, I suppose. So let's go ahead and shift select more of this because I want all of this to chamfer together. Yeah, that'd be cool. So if you go too far, again, it can only do this chamfer so far, right? Because it starts to run into some other geometry. So if I pull this too far, you'll see it disappears, and my box down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen there turns red, like it gets a red outline to let me know that that operation is not really possible anymore. But that's how much I want to do there. And yeah, that'll just kind of finish out that edge nicely. Now, again, we need to make sure that we bring that over to the other side so that we're still symmetrical. And yeah, at this point, I'm pretty happy with this piece. Like, we haven't spent a lot of time. There's some things that are annoying to me about it, like these panel lines just kind of end here. They don't go around the front of the piece. And if you've ever seen me build a model kit and complain about the existing molded panel lines on a kit, that always bugs me when a line just ends like that. But in this case, we'll let it slide because this is just a demo for you guys. But yeah, this compared to the other very simple wing that we created in Blender, I think is, you know, much more visually interesting. These small details should print okay at the size we're trying to print at. We should see all of these lines and details. I will go ahead and send this to the printer and we'll take a look at it when it comes off the printer so I can show you guys how it comes out. But yeah, at this point, I'm happy with this piece. I'm ready to go. I would probably do one last thing, which is to select this fin part and this base part and boolean them together as well, just so that it's all a single piece, and then I can export it straight from Plasticity here as an STL and send it over to my resin printer. So yeah, I'll do that now, and then we'll come back and I'll show you guys. I think I still have the original printed piece from the Blender version that we made a year and a half ago, or however long ago that was. I still have not completed that model kit. So I'll dig out that model kit, I'll dig out the original Blender piece, and we'll print this one, and we can compare the two and see how they turned out. All right, my friends, as promised, I dug through the storage archives and I found the top half of this model kit that we were working on when we built this original fin piece. And here it is, stuck in the outside of his arm. So I'll go ahead and pull this one out. This is the part that we designed and printed last time in Blender. The only difference, I think, since the last time you saw it in that other video is that I have put a coat of primer on it, and here it is compared to the printed version of the part that we just now designed. Let me see if I can get these in focus for the camera here. So you can see this one is a little stubbier and more rounded. Part of that's because of the beveled edges that we added, and part of it's just because of the shape that I drew was a little bit different this time than it was that original shape. But you can see all the extra detail that we added in there. The lines and everything look pretty good. There's a little bit of stair stepping on the outside of this print. Now I haven't done any processing on it at all. So if I sanded that down and put a coat of primer like I've done here, the surface here would look a lot smoother than it is. Yeah, but you can see all of the detail there, all the little lines and extra detail that we added. Now, just to give you guys a better look, I actually also printed a version of this part at twice the size, so 200% scale. So here you can see all of those little details. And on that smaller version of the part, if we were to, like I said, sand it down and hit it with a coat of primer, a lot of this would pop out as well. But you can see all the nice little chamfered and beveled edges that we added and how those came out on the print. And they're making it look, you know, much more like a real part, as opposed to this one, which is just a shape with very squared off edges, right? So that's kind of the difference for me looking at these parts. And then the other thing I guess we should check and make sure that this new one fits here in the arm. And yeah, it does, and it's nice and solid and good. So again, with a coat of primer, this thing would match pretty nicely, I think, with the rest of the kit. So I think that'll do it for this video. Hope you found this enjoyable and a good kind of intro look at plasticity and what you can do with it, and kind of the differences, at least in my opinion, between you know, when I might want to use Blender versus plasticity on projects going forward. Having said that, there is the Blender Gunpla series here on the channel, and I do plan to continue that. I know some of you have been asking about that in comments on the videos, so that will be resuming very shortly here on the channel. But having said that, if you're interested in using plasticity to do some of these types of projects as well, drop a comment down below and let me know, so that I can plan for the future and, you know, figure out which of the two applications or maybe even others we might take a look at going forward. One last thing I'll ask you to do, if you've watched this far, go hit the like button down below. That original video, the one that we have sort of copied this design from, like I said, is my most popular video here on the channel. So I'd like to try to make this sequel just as successful as that first one was. And you can help out by going and hitting that like button down there and helping YouTube spread it to more people. And with that said, I will just say thank you for watching. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.